Let's go. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We were always really excited to have the opportunity to talk with folks across ODU. And today we're going to talk about ePortfolios. You are welcome to view our slide deck on your own screen if you'd prefer not to look at a shared screen, and you can also access these materials afterwards. Also, we don't disappear into the ether, so if there's any questions after this brief presentation, you are always welcome to reach out to our team throughout your time at ODU, and sometimes beyond, should you have an alumni question about portfolios. And I believe, Elle, you're throwing that in the chat. Thank you, you're so good. And we figure it's polite to introduce ourselves. I am Megan Mize. I am the Director for ePortfolios and Digital Initiatives in our Academic Success Center. I also teach in our English department and our Interdisciplinary Studies program. And in my role, I really oversee the ePortfolio program writ large, but I work very closely with faculty and administrators in particular to weave these kinds of exercises into folks' curriculum and courses. And then Elle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elle Tyson. I'm the Assistant Director for ePortfolios and Digital Initiative Support. And I oversee kind of the training and mentoring of our student support and class visits and that sort of thing that our tutors go to. So do the training and mentoring of our tutors. And I also teach in the English department and the interdisciplinary studies.
We like to joke that to be on the portfolio team, you do have to have creative color hair. So that's one way you know it's us. And both Elle and I are alumni of ODU. I got my PhD here in 2018, and Elle is currently cracking her way through the doctoral program. So we always love talking to others who are in that process. So please know that when we talk about these things, we're also coming from a place of shared experience and empathy. We know the workload you're under, pardon me, and we kind of know what anxieties might lay ahead for you. And so we really see ourselves as a team that's here to support you using that kind of guideline and that personal experience. And with that in mind, I know it can often seem really stressful to say to students, who have a large workload, you probably have families, busy life, professional career already, to say to them, hey, you should really be thinking about your online identity. But there is really useful information for us to show how that is received when students graduate out of programs here at ODU. So for instance, these are at this point a little old, like a few years old. So the data is actually moving upwards. These percentages are moving higher, especially post-pandemic, right? But in one survey, the Manifest Recruitment Survey, employers, 98% of employers admitted that they do background research on folks online. So beyond the materials that you send, I feel like 2% of them are lying or maybe not fully truthful, but they'll look you up, they'll Google you, they'll see what is out there. A lot of them look at social media. So things like Twitter, LinkedIn are certainly really important. They may even look at other things like Instagram or, God help us all, TikTok. And a lot of them mention that they use Google in particular, which is really important because Google's algorithms push up mobile responsive websites. So, that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later. And then the one that's really important is that 80% of them said finding a personal website was really important to them when they were evaluating a candidate because it flushes out the kind of skeletal information they get from a resume or a brief cover letter or a CV. Moreover, you'll see on the right-hand side, and I won't read all these stats to you, but I think it's worth looking at them. When they were looking at this media online, and we're using social media very broadly, i.e. media that's meant for public consumption in a digital space. So I'm not just talking about Instagram, right? And neither was this survey. But when they look for this information, what is it they're looking for when they Google you? And I think what's really interesting are the elements are different than what we often are told within our various programs. Look at that second bullet point. 34% of them were looking for someone who is creative. And that is not something we often hear about, especially in graduate programs, that they're looking for creative thinkers or people who come at things in new and innovative ways. 31% of them were looking for someone with a wide range of interests. And again, when we're becoming experts in a field, we often think we have to be so narrowly focused on one thing, but they're looking for individuals who have a broad array of skills and knowledge sets that they can draw on. But the ones that I really like are kind of at the bottom. 31% are looking for personality. This past year alone, I've been on 5 job searches, and pardon me, I can tell you that all of them talked about personality and fit. And often it came down to having people who were mirrored in talents and skills, but we talked a lot about personality and where can you convey that in online spaces. And then the last one I'm going to really point you at is 21%. And I know that number, again, this is an older survey, that number is going up, is they were also looking for multimedia. A lot of times folks may think, just a written resume or a written CV and I'm good to go. But they were looking for people who knew how to write and compose for online spaces with video, audio, images, etc. We're just in a really kind of multimodal world at this point. And after the pandemic, people are really interested to see who can communicate online and do it well. Pardon me. So we're going to talk to you about ePortfolios as one way of doing that, to help you kind of generate this really comprehensive digital identity that reflects who you are as a learner and a practitioner and a professional. And one reason that ePortfolios have gotten so much push in higher ed in particular, although we're seeing them in K through 12 as well, is that it's known as a high impact practice. And what that means is that it's this evidence-based approach to teaching and learning that shows us increases in retention of information. Many times students are able to remember content that they reflected on in their portfolios more deeply than other material that they maybe just turned in for a grade and things of that nature. But to us, most importantly, it's a place where you can create a narrative, where you can kind of weave all these various experiences you have. You have all these different classes, you have work, you maybe do community service, and weave it all together in kind of a meaningful thesis about who you are, what you know, and what you bring to the table for teams that you might want to work with or schools you might want to teach at. And the portfolio is just a really lovely place to practice that. And that's known as integrative learning. So for those of you who might be thinking about teaching, you might hear this terminology a lot, but a lot of times students are asked to kind of produce a 20-page paper and you're done with it. You get your grade and you move on to the next class, and maybe you remember that and maybe you don't. But integrative learning is the idea that all of your experiences should interconnect in some way, and you're the one who determines what was valuable, how those different experiences, both in your curriculum and outside of it, connect, and kind of synthesizing that for someone who's never met you, who knows nothing about you, does not understand the curriculum you went through, and then indicating to them how you transfer that knowledge to a new scenario. So for instance, if you were to look at one of my early portfolios, I would describe all of the work I did in the English doctoral program, early conferences, things of that nature, early awards, and how that informed my teaching, and then led to me starting to do the kind of work I do now, where I help others think about teaching with technology. That is not a narrative that someone who wouldn't know me would just get from a brief cover letter and not see examples of that kind of work to see what skills and experience I have. Because just anyone can tell you they're good, but a portfolio makes you show people you're good. And before we go too far, we just wanted to highlight too that the Career Pathways program does have an ePortfolio, guidelines for both tracks. And again, you have this link, and I'm sure you can find this content elsewhere. And you can see the Preparing Future Faculty here, and the Preparing Future Professionals is the second one. And it's not an overly complex or draconic design. They are doing exactly what I think is helpful to you here. They give you a skeleton. You'll need to include your CV or your resume. That's pretty normal. reflections on the 6 professional development activities you engage in, or for the future professionals, your IDP, and then a reflection on your teaching experience for the faculty, the IDP for your professionals. And so then you kind of have these various sections breaking down your experience in this program. And that's helpful because someone outside ODU would not know what Career Pathways is, or what it asked you to do, or what you thought the value of it was. But here you can kind of claim that ownership and reflect on that experience. And if you have a larger portfolio, you could even link to this specific portfolio, or you could include it as a tab in a larger website. So all of this to say is this is a good way to get your feet wet, to build out one, see how you like it, see what you need to include, and then think about how you might expand that beyond in years to come. And I will share with you that portfolios are fluid. It's digital writing. You don't hit print and then it's that way forever. You build a website and you can move pages around, delete pages, change colors. My website changes every year because I use it for my self-evaluation for the institution. And so I'm constantly updating and altering it to reflect who I am in that moment. So all that to say is you do have guidelines. They're a really good way for you to get started, and then they can help you kind of practice where you might go. And so speaking of where you might go, it's really helpful to look at some models of portfolios. And we have 3 that we are asking you to take a few minutes to look through. You don't have to look through all of them. Maybe you really get interested in one. And I know Elle is dropping the links in the chat. Thank you. And so I invite you to look through, click on their links, look at the material that they embed, and maybe take a few notes. So first we have Anna Toledano, who is actually a graduate student at Stanford. So she has a lot of content, but I think hers is very interesting and we can chat about it further in a minute. We also have Kenneth Fernandez, and then at the bottom, Brandon Johnson. And you can see some questions off to the right, but you can really pull apart anything that you want to talk about in a minute. So just to kind of share some guiding questions. When you look through these portfolios, what stands out to you? Did you find something effective? Did something seem ineffective to you? And then the last one, because people often ask us this question, what makes an ePortfolio different from something like LinkedIn? You don't have to have answers to all those. There's no grade here, but I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes and ask you to look through the examples. Everyone, I saw you making comments above about things like organization. One thing I would really love to stress, and I think I'm going to pull up Brandon's in a second because a number of people talked about his design. But I think it is important to note how selective each of these individuals are, right? I mean, some have more content than others, but thinking about online readers, they only have so much patience, right? So sometimes less is more. So when you select meaningful examples of your work, it has a higher impact. And I think it's fair to point out that Brandon, of course, is working in the field as a planetary scientist. So he's a little ahead of everyone else that you see here. And that's okay. I like to show these more as aspirational than to say, this is the thing you have to build right out the bat. So if someone would like to speak a little bit about their thoughts about Brandon Johnson's.
I will say that I'm glad to hear that this isn't the goal for the first portfolio, because Brandon's got some good stuff going on in this. I do agree that sometimes, yeah, it's a lot of stuff, but he's obviously got a lot of stuff to convey. So I think that's probably part of it.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, and again, just aspirational, just to show you too, because we had someone once ask us, well, is this a thing only students do? And the answer is not at all. In fact, it's starting to become quite a norm that people have websites to reflect who they are in their field. And if you move past Brandon's design, he has a lot of design going on here. You see small animations, things like that coming up. If you worry less about that and think about his content, here he's got an example of group work and he has a video of that demo playing, right? So he's pulled very selectively an example of his work. you get to see his face. He links out to his Google Scholar, and he's got his publications. And so that tells you really what you need to know about Brandon. If I was sitting on my phone at a conference and I looked him up, I would be like, Brandon's a planetary scientist. Here's an example of his work. Here's his publications and how I can get a hold of him. Fantastic. I know who Brandon is. And one thing that I always like to stress with Brandon's in particular is he's got a running joke throughout, which I kind of enjoy. We talk often to people about the fact that portfolios can reflect personality in a way that a resume is sometimes a little harder to do. But his name is Brandon Johnson, and he does this dash with the on, Brandon Johnson. And if you look throughout, every time there's an on at the end, he's going to hyphenate it. So, for instance, publication on, right? And so his brand is always on. So he has a small kind of joke within it. And I think that's really interesting because scientists are often thought of as pretty serious, and you've got a little wink and a nudge, and you get to see this very human picture of him. And you're like, yeah, that looks like the kind of guy who would make that joke, right? So Brandon both shows who he is as a professional and as a human being. I saw somebody comment on Anna's. Would you like to maybe open your mic and say a little bit about hers? No pressure.
I'd like to comment about Anna's. It shows she's a historian and a museum professional, possibly a curator.
Mm-hmm.
And not often do people understand what it is that you do. So I think that the portfolio is a really good exemplar of not only what she does, but it kind of explains visually
Yes.
what she does every day. It kind of gets the viewer interested in her as a person and maybe what her daily tasks are as a professional.
Yeah, that is a very concise way of saying everything I love about this portfolio. And it's why I use it. It's not an ODU one, so I always feel like I'm cheating, but it demonstrates so well everything you just said. Even if you never moved past this landing page, you know what you need to know about Anna. You know her name is front and center. She describes 3 professional roles she occupies, and I love that she ends it with storyteller, right? Like, what is it you do within these roles? And then she buffs that with this historical archival image in the background, in which it's a science museum, and you get to see like this open-jawed Boy Scout in awe as somebody's telling them about the material. She has done such an excellent job here in such a short space. But then she does something, and I think you called this out, something that if you looked at all 3 of the portfolios, they all do this. They have these kind of short, concise descriptions of who they are and what they do and why. I'm a historian and a museum professional who uses objects to tell stories about the past. Fantastic. That's her elevator pitch. I now know what Anna studies and why she does it. And that's really hard. She workshopped that. But she has this brief bio. And something else that I'm going to steal from her the next time I do a major overhaul to my portfolio is I love this section on what are the questions that drive me and what are the things that she researches. And then when you click find out more, it's going to take you to her bio. You get to see who she is. If you were to dig throughout, you'll see her experiences with museums, right? And so you can see all the hard work she's done. And again, just these are aspirational, these are models. This is not what you would design to first step out. But all that to say is that she has pulled really important examples that amplify that message. If she is someone who tells stories about the past, do I see evidence of that? Why, yes, she did a public engagement at the Computer History Museum. Like, she isn't just interested, she's done the work of exhibit planning. Here's a link to the exhibit she helped plan, right? So it goes back to the old adage of showing us, not telling us. She's showing us that she knows those things, and thus it takes it a step beyond. And, I think all 3 of them come at it from a very different angle. And if you think about design, they all looked very different in terms of style and font and layout. Anna and Brandon's are a nice comparison because Anna's is what we call a multi-page site, you know, a little more traditional. You know, she's got all these pages in a menu, whereas Brandon's is more of a one-pager, a scrolling website where you never leave it. And again, that's someone who's thinking about mobile devices, right? Which is kind of increasingly the way we tend to look at material quickly, at least. Thank you, guys. And there's thousands of portfolios examples. Those aren't the only ones, and we have a whole gallery, and we're always happy to show you more. In fact, Al, if you'd like to drop Chris Rollins' example, and I'm not going to go into his at this time, but this is an ODU student, a graduate student in cybersecurity. And you can see, you know, like, again, his is at a different level. It's not necessarily as polished as something as like Brandon's, but this is a student talking about his curriculum. In fact, I'm going to stop talking about it and show it. But you can see that he's got his image, his name. You can kind of cruise through and start to get some idea of who he is. One thing he does that I really love with his About Me is he ties his personal history, you know, of his family immigrating from Haiti, and ties it to the work he does at ODU. So his work in cybersecurity is deeply tied to the community that he sees himself helping. And again, you see pictures and descriptions of him doing that work. And so I hope you start to get a sense of why portfolios really are occupying a pretty important space, both in learning and in hiring practices these days, because we all want to work with people we think are skilled and that we also might like, you know. So let me take it back a page. Nope, the other way. There we go. And so, Eric, you know, I hear you. You know, I showed you some pretty advanced examples there, but it's not actually a mystery to how to get there. You know, it's not a mystical process. And here we kind of have the 5 C's. So you can tell this comes from English and communication as a field, right? But really, your first step, you're already doing it. When you're in your courses or you're doing your professional work, you're creating content that can make its way into your portfolio as evidence, just as we saw in some of those models, right? The second step there, though, is to intentionally archive that material, because that's something we hear from grad students in particular. Like, they're racing through these massive deadlines. And then when they get to the end, they're like, man, I did not save that. I know I produced a PowerPoint for that conference, but I don't know where it is. No one took a video of me giving that workshop. I wish I had that recording. So intentionally archive that. You know, I am annoyingly famous among my friends at conferences for when they're giving conference presentations. I'm up in the front row recording them and then sending it to them so that they have it for their ePortfolios. You know, and it's just a really good way of making sure everyone is visible, that work is represented in the field, and that our fields start to represent the people who are actually in them, right? So, and then you all kind of hit it. There's a curation stage, thinking again about what is it your audience needs to see and how much time are they going to give you. You know, so elsewhere, there's an example where the student put in 3 projects, just 3. And that's it, you know, but he's showing 3 different skill sets, you know, so intentionally choose what you're putting in your portfolio as an example of your work. In my case, because I am both an administrator, a researcher, and a teacher, I have tabs for each one and examples for each of those roles that I occupy to show people how I do those things. So curation is really key, because if you just throw everything at someone, a lot of times it's just noise, and they just close the website because they don't know what it is you want them to take away. And then the 4th step when you're building these out is to converse with others. That seems really common sense, but people don't do it. They'll build the ePortfolio and then like hide it. And it's like, show it to your colleagues in your field, show it to your professors, show it to people you might like to work for, or who you know, have positions that you are aiming at, to see how that looks. I always give this example from my first portfolio because I really started life as a literary scholar. And I created a website that I thought was really beautiful, The content was good, but it had a lot of like pastels and kind of cursive script. And the literature scholars loved it. And the rhetoric and composition folks were like, are you getting married? This looks like a wedding website. And they were right. It was a wedding template. So I had to think about, how am I situating myself in the field? And that feedback at that point was extremely useful. And they also told me, you know, I was expecting to see, for instance, a slide deck from your most recent conference, and you didn't have that in there. Do you have an example of that? So, you know, share it with others. Let it be that social media that we were talking about, because it is meant to be consumed by other folks. And then finally, and I think this is often hardest for us, is connected to future use, right? Put it to work for you. People will build these gorgeous portfolios and then be like, hey, nobody looked at it. And it's like, well, where did you put it? Is it on your LinkedIn? There's a space for it. Is it in your professional social media identity if you have one? Is it in your email signature? Is it on your business card? Is it on the letterhead of your resume? Like it's a tool, but you have to push it, you know? You have to make sure it's out there. So not magic, and there is a team to help you. So that's the second part of the good news, but not mystical. And then, Al, is this where I turn it over to you?
Yes.
Okay. I can't see.
I know it's hard when you can't see the notes at the bottom. You're like, oh shoot, is this it? Hello, everyone. So we like to have this slide. We know there's a lot of stuff on it, but we also share this presentation with you so you can go back and look at it. But sometimes when people hear that they need to put evidence of their work in their ePortfolio, all they can think of is their papers. But the evidence of your learning and of all your experiences is so much more than just a paper that you wrote. Not that papers aren't important, but there's just a lot of other things that you can put in there. So you can put professional goal statements, you know, your teaching philosophy, professional philosophy, that sort of thing. Anytime you're asked to do any type of reflective work in your classes, that type of work is really important for showing what you got out of something. You know, you can drop a paper in there, but if you're not talking about kind of the experience of writing it and doing that research, it just doesn't mean as much. And then just all of your experience, if you do any community service work, volunteering, anything that you do with professional organizations, awards, honors you've had. But then also really thinking, like Megan said, think of it ahead of time. Get that picture taken of you, you know, with a poster or standing at the front giving a conference presentation, you know, record yourself giving the presentation, you know, because that's a good example of you doing public speaking. Make infographics of things, charts of things, all of that stuff that is really good to put in your ePortfolio, because you want things that people can look at quickly and understand and know the message that you're trying to convey with that particular thing. All right. So we are going to do a little bit of practice and demonstration of Canva. This is a really easy ePortfolio platform. But anyway, so there's Canva. You just go to canva.com. And basically, if you can make a slideshow, you can make a website on Canva. So basically, all you're going to do is say that you want to design a website, and then click on website. Let's see. And you can pick one of these, or actually, I'm going to go over here and make a website. So I want it to just be blank to start with. All right. So basically the way Canva works is that each time you add a page, it's just going to add a section to your website. So Canva is making a site that is really just going to be kind of the endless scroll like Brandon's site was. So I'm going to do it a little bit simpler. So basically, you know, you can just pick from these layouts. You can pick the more designed ones. Just be careful. Anytime there's the crown, it means that you have to pay for it. That is up to you. If you would like to pay for it, you obviously can. But so basically, this would be the first one. Then you just add a page for all your subsequent sections. So for the PFF and PFP one, you know, this could be your intro. Each section could be a different professional development experience that you're reflecting on. You have a little picture, you know, of yourself while you're at that experience. You can have a section for your IDP or your teaching experience reflection. And then that's two. I want at least three so I can show you guys kind of what it will look like once you get to the actual website. But this one, it's really easy. It kind of does some of that design work for you. You can move stuff around if you want to. So if you're designing and you find that you want to move stuff, you can, but it does it nicely where everything is lined up for you. So I always tell students, you know, make it your own, but don't fight the design too much. That's when you kind of get stuff off center. So I'm going to say, so we have that. We can put a little picture. I don't think I have very many things uploaded on here. And then when you want to kind of preview what it will look like, it lets you kind of see what the actual website will look like. I haven't added images, so it's not going to show anything up. But basically, it just scrolls down for you. So this is a really easy one that you can use. You don't have to have a lot of design experience. Each little section is just like making a slide in a slideshow, and then it will create it in like a website format for you. Let me see. So here is the demo that Megan shared in the chat. And you can see you just keep scrolling down. You can link out to other things, you know, put screenshots of things, but it just creates a nice little scrolling website for you. So that is how you get started in Canva. It is. And then you can also use Wix. So we also support Wix. Wix has a lot more design options. To get to it, you just go to wix.com. So basically, when you sign in, it will ask you a lot of questions if it's the first time that you signed in. But when you get to it and you go to create a new site, you can say that you want to do a portfolio. I'm going to skip this for now just to save us some time.
Well, that's going on. A question, if I may. Is it recommended, or does it even matter? You wouldn't need to do this to have e-portfolios on the different ones, like the Wix and Canva, or just one would be enough because it's going to be identified to you anyway?
So just one is enough. We like to show Canva because it doesn't take as much design knowledge, but sometimes people find it like if they want to do a lot of different design, they'll get frustrated because they're like, I want to do this particular thing, and it's not strong enough to do that for them. So you can see on Wix, you have all of these options of different things that you can add. You know, you can add buttons, images, videos, but you can see when you go to it, there's just a lot that you can do. So we like to show it if you like design, if you want to be able to like really design a lot, and that's fun for you and important for you. Wix is a good option. If you're more interested in just having a clean site that it kind of does a lot of that formatting and designing for you, then Canva is a good option.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, but that's a good question. Yeah, you don't need one in every single different type, but you can have more than one portfolio. So, you know, if you make your one for this program, but then you want to have one that's like a little bit broader, you can do that and just link to this one that you make for PFF and PFP. All right, go ahead and show this. And we do actually have templates that we can make for you. This is just basically to just kind of get you started. It has a basic menu. You can either do the student template or the faculty template. For those of you doing PFP, the student one probably makes more sense. And for those of you doing the PFF, probably the faculty one. But basically, it just has it kind of set up for you with a menu of the basic things that students generally need in their portfolio. And then you can edit it as much as you want to make it your own. But it's just, sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of help when you're first getting started. So that is a form that you fill out. We are manually doing that, so it can take, you know, a couple of days for us to get the request and make the copy for you, and then you get an email transferred to you. So you do have to accept the transfer to get it. All right. And as we said before, you are not alone. We have tutors. You can meet with them online. You can meet with them face-to-face in the ePortfolio studio. We have open studio sessions and other workshops like these ones. You can also ask for video feedback. So if you've created your site and you really just want someone to kind of look at it, give you some advice, we can look at it, create a video, and then you can watch the video in your own time. And then we also have written tutorials, video tutorials. We have our gallery that has more examples for you to look at. Examples are a really good way to kind of see what you like, what you want to copy, and that kind of thing. And then we have our starting guides that are just the basic tutorials to get you started. So we have those for Canva, for Wix, and for the ODU WordPress. And then I think I will hand it back over to you, Megan.
Excellent. And these are good questions. And just to emphasize again, we don't expect you to walk away from that quick demo knowing how to do everything. But more than that, we just want to give you a flavor of what the various options are. And there are more than what you just saw. You know, we talk about Canva as kind of the quick, low tech. You know, you've got a few hours of time. You can knock a Canva website out in an hour or two and be done easily. Wix is good, friendly, but it is a lot. Like it will give you a million options to do all kinds of design. And WordPress, someone was asking earlier about something being hosted at ODU. ODU has one web builder, that's WordPress. And it is a powerful web builder, but it is, of the three we're talking about today, the least intuitive. And because it's hosted by ODU, it has a lot of institutional constraints, again, post-pandemic in particular, like data storage and design options are extremely limited. And so we find a lot of times people start building in it and get frustrated because they can't embed a picture or, things of that nature. And so we don't discourage you from any platform, but we wanted you to get a sense of what's out there and what each of them offers you. So just pick one, and know you're not alone, because we have a team who will sit down with you as many times as you need to work with you on that portfolio. And we kind of want to round it out with just some trends that we're seeing again in the market. So this came out last year, I believe, from the AAC&U, the American Association of Colleges and Universities, and they did a large-scale survey with employers. And they were showing that in the last several years that ePortfolios have consistently been marked higher and increasingly higher than transcripts as things that they weigh in terms of employability and marketability. And the one that I really like to stress here, especially in light of ODU's upcoming plans with like internships, et cetera, is that all of that is really important. Obviously, that having these experiences are really important, but we see that 44% of employers said they were much more likely to consider a candidate with an ePortfolio, and 45% said they were somewhat more likely. And so that puts us at 89% of employers are more likely to consider you if you have a portfolio. That means it's something worth having in your back pocket, ready to go. And, maybe you're not looking for a new job. Maybe you are in your field, but, there's also work out there about how do we find our colleagues? How do we find people to collaborate and work with? I certainly know my portfolios, and I have a few, have led me to consulting gigs or people pulling me into research that I would not have been pulled into because it's an invitation. It's sitting out there and they're looking for someone who's doing the work I'm doing. And so I just encourage you to think about it, not just as someone looking at a new career, but maybe someone invested in one already. How do I expand out my network or invite people to join me in the work I'm doing? So these are really important trends. They're not, I think, going to decrease in the coming years, since we are a largely digital culture at this point in terms of dominant modes of communication. But we've thrown a lot at you. And so we want to take a breather and step back for a minute. And you can tell, again, we're English scholars because we're going to do a little free write. And so for just a few moments, I would like you to pick one of these questions and write a response in the chat. So I'll read the questions, but you can be writing there. There's zero judgment. So either, how are you feeling about portfolios? Are you interested? Are you anxious now that we've talked about them? Or have you had experiences building one before? And if so, how'd that go? Or now that we've gone through this, what are your aspirations for your portfolio? What would you like to produce when you do this work? Or finally, the kind of catch-all, what are some questions you have at the end of this session? So again, I'm going to give you just a few minutes to kind of formulate responses. Again, you can pick only one, please, but if you'd like to pick more, you're welcome to. And then we'll chat a bit.